My own sister tried to steal my success, claim my business as her own, and even demanded 27% of the profits from the company I built from scratch. Stick with me while I share my story, and if it touches you, don't forget to support our channel by hitting that subscribe button, dropping a like, and sharing it with the people you care about. My name is Rachel, and I've never had anything handed to me. Growing up, my sister Melissa was the golden child. She was prettier, louder, more charming, and people just naturally liked her. Teachers adored her, neighbors spoiled her, and even our parents always seemed to favor her. I was the quiet one, the one who worked hard but went unnoticed. I learned early on that if I wanted something, I'd have to build it myself. Life after high school wasn't easy. I didn't finish college, and I bounced from job to job for years, barely scraping by. But I always loved baking. It was the one place where I felt in control, where my hands and mind worked together to create something good. On weekends, I started baking bread and selling it at the farmer's market. At first, I barely made enough to cover my flour and yeast, but slowly, people kept coming back. They loved what I made. That gave me a spark I hadn't felt in years. I saved every extra dollar, worked nights, and eventually scraped enough together to rent a tiny shop. It wasn't fancy, just a small corner space with peeling paint and a secondhand oven, but it was mine. I spent long nights there, testing recipes, decorating the front window, learning how to run things alone. The first morning I opened, I didn't know if anyone would even walk through the door. By noon, I had a line out the door. Word spread quickly, and for the first time in my life, I felt proud of myself. Melissa showed up, of course. She smiled, hugged me, and told everyone how proud she was. At first, I thought it was nice. She'd hang around, chatting with customers, introducing herself like she was part of it all. I brushed it off because I was too busy kneading dough and keeping the shelves full. But then she started slipping little comments into conversations, calling the bakery our business, telling people she gave me the idea, acting like she had a hand in the hard work. It stung, but I let it go. I told myself it didn't matter what she said. I knew the truth. I was the one waking up at 4 a.m. to bake, paying the rent, and managing the money. But deep down, I could feel something ugly starting to grow. Melissa wasn't just proud of me, she was planting seeds, making people believe she had built this with me. At that time, I had no idea just how far she was willing to go. I thought it was just her being dramatic, the way she always was. I didn't realize she was about to cross a line that would change everything between us forever. I dropped out of college after realizing the debt piling on my shoulders would never match the direction of my life. For years, I stumbled through jobs that left me drained and empty. Waitressing, cleaning offices at night, working registers for people who never remembered my name. Every paycheck disappeared as quickly as it came, and I felt stuck in a cycle that had no exit. The only comfort I found was in the kitchen. Baking calmed me, gave me purpose. It wasn't just about food. It was about shaping something with my own hands and watching it grow into more than what I started with. I began experimenting, trying new recipes late into the night. Eventually, I found a rhythm with bread. Not the ordinary kind, but loaves rich with flavor, crusts that sang when they cracked open, the kind of bread that made people pause when they tasted it. One day, almost on impulse, I signed up for a booth at the local farmer's market. I didn't even know if anyone would buy from me, but I scraped together enough ingredients for a small batch and packed them into baskets. That first morning, I set up my table before the sun came up. The hours stretched long as I stood there alone, smiling at strangers, trying to draw them in. Slowly, people wandered over. Some bought out of curiosity, others out of kindness, but a few returned the next week with friends. They wanted more. That tiny spark kept me going. Week after week, I baked through the night and worked the stall by day. My body ached, but the sight of people coming back, asking about my bread, made the exhaustion worth it. It felt like maybe, just maybe, I had found something real, something I could build on. Melissa showed up a few times. She came dressed like she was walking into a brunch rather than a market, sunglasses perched on her head, polished nails holding a latte. She clapped me on the back, told me how cute my little stand was, how she admired my effort. Then, with that same smooth tone she always used, she added that it was nice I found a hobby, though she doubted it could ever grow into anything serious. She laughed as she said it, like she was joking, but I felt the sting. Her words lingered in my head as I packed up unsold loaves, counting out the small stack of bills I had earned. It wasn't much, but it was mine. I didn't let her comment stop me. I tightened my apron strings, focused on each customer, and poured myself into the work. After months of saving every spare dollar, I signed the lease for a narrow shop space on the edge of town. The paint was chipped, the floor uneven, but when I turned the key for the first time, I saw possibility. It was more than 4 walls. It was proof that the dream I had carved out of nothing was beginning to take shape. The first few weeks after opening the shop were a blur. From the moment I unlocked the door each morning, people crowded inside. The smell of fresh bread drifted down the street, drawing neighbors and strangers alike. By midday, shelves were bare, and I was already mixing more dough for the next day. A reporter from the local paper stopped by one afternoon, curious about the constant line out front. Within a week, my face and my loaves were printed in black and white, and business only grew stronger. Regulars began greeting me by name, bringing their friends to the little bakery everyone was talking about. It felt like all the years of scraping by had finally led to something solid. I watched customers linger by the window, tearing into still warm baguettes, and for the first time in my life, I didn't feel invisible. Every handshake, every smile, every compliment felt earned. Then Melissa started appearing more often. At first, I thought she was just being supportive, popping in to check on me. But she wasn't slipping behind the counter to actually work. Instead, she planted herself near the register, striking up conversations with whoever came in. She introduced herself with a bright smile and a laugh, speaking as though she belonged there. "Oh yes, I help my sister run this place," she'd say casually, her words sliding out like people nodded, assuming it was true, and I'd be too busy slicing bread or bagging orders to correct her without causing a scene. Customers began thanking her as they walked out the door, and she accepted their gratitude like it was her own. She had a way of leaning against the counter, chatting with ease, while I was elbow-deep in flour. Her presence shifted the air, like she was the one running things and I was her assistant. It didn't stop in the bakery. At family dinners, Melissa held court, telling stories about how she had guided me through big decisions, how her advice had shaped the shop's success. She claimed she had been the one to encourage me to take risks, that she had connections that brought in business. The worst part was the way everyone nodded along, clapping her on the back, praising her for being such a supportive sister. I sat there silent, forcing a smile, swallowing down the urge to speak. What could I say without sounding petty? To argue would make me look ungrateful, jealous even. I told myself it didn't matter. I knew who was waking before dawn, who was kneading dough until her arms ached, who was sweeping the floor after the last customer left. Melissa's chatter couldn't erase that. Family pride, I thought. Maybe she just wanted to feel part of something good. So I let it slide, convincing myself it wasn't worth the fight. But deep down, a quiet unease began to take root. Something about the way she slipped so easily into my story made me wonder how far she'd go. The bakery's rhythm settled into something steady, then quickly outgrew my hands alone. Every morning the line stretched longer, and I knew I couldn't keep up by myself. After running numbers late one night, I posted a small sign in the window, "Help wanted." Within a week, 2 part-timers joined me, Claire, a college student with quick hands, and Ben, a retired mechanic who wanted a few hours to stay busy. Their energy gave me breathing room, and for the first time since opening, I didn't feel like I was drowning under flour and orders. With their help, I began looking beyond the front counter. A nearby cafe asked if I could supply their daily bread baskets. A small grocery followed soon after, placing regular orders. Loading trays into delivery crates felt surreal, my recipes traveling to tables I'd never see. I was no longer just feeding walk-ins. My work was spreading further than I had dared to imagine. That was when Melissa's presence deepened. She showed up almost daily, not to roll dough or scrub pans, but to hover with a phone in hand, snapping photos as though she were documenting her own achievement. She'd lean against the counter, tossing out lines like, "You should adjust your prices. People will pay more if you sell it right." Or, "What you really need is a sleek logo to look professional." Claire and Ben exchanged glances when she spoke, but Melissa delivered her advice with such confidence that it hung in the air like truth. The way she carried herself shifted too. Customers who lingered sometimes assumed she was in charge, and she never corrected. I overheard her more than once telling people about our bakery, her voice swelling with pride, as if she had rolled up her sleeves beside me each dawn. I bit my tongue, telling myself the damage wasn't worth confronting. Family arguments had a way of spreading like wildfire, and I didn't want to fan the flames. If she needed to feel important, maybe letting her pretend was the easier path. Still, the more she inserted herself, the heavier my chest felt. It wasn't just her presence. It was the way she began to believe her own performance. That glint in her eye when customers praised the business wasn't simple pride. It was ownership. Then one afternoon, while I was closing up, a man in a pressed suit walked in. He introduced himself as Daniel, a local investor. He'd been watching the bakery's rise, he said, and admired how quickly it had gained a reputation. He spoke of potential, of scaling up, of storefronts beyond our little town. His words sent a jolt through me, possibilities I hadn't allowed myself to picture. Expansion. Growth. A future bigger than the narrow shop I had poured myself into. As I listened, Melissa hovered nearby, her her eyes sharp and calculating. She wasn't part of the conversation, but the way she lingered told me she wanted to be. Sunday dinners at my parents' house had always been noisy affairs, pots clattering in the kitchen, the smell of roast chicken filling every corner, voices layered on top of one. That evening started no differently, but I should have noticed the way Melissa carried herself when she walked in. She wore a smile too wide, a dress meant to draw eyes, and she spoke with the calm certainty of someone rehearsing a performance. The meal was halfway through when she cleared her throat and tapped her glass with a fork. "I just want to take a moment," she began, her voice bright, "to celebrate what Rachel and I have built together." Forks froze, conversations halted. She leaned back in her chair like a queen making an announcement. "Our bakery has been such a success, and it wouldn't have been possible without the partnership we've formed. As most of you know, I hold 27% ownership, and I couldn't be prouder." The room erupted in congratulations. My aunt raised a glass, cousins clapped, and my father beamed with pride. I sat frozen, my mouth dry, words caught somewhere between disbelief and rage. 27%? She said it as though it were carved in stone. Finally, I managed to speak. "Melissa, that's not true. You don't own any part of the bakery." My voice shook, but the words came firm. "I started it, I run it, and I've never agreed to anything like that." She didn't flinch. Instead, she tilted her head and gave me that pitying smile she had perfected since childhood. "Rachel, don't be so dramatic. You know I've been with you every step of the way, talking to customers, spreading the word, giving you advice. That's what built your reputation. Without my charisma, you'd still be selling loaves out of a folding table." Gasps and murmurs filled the table. My mother frowned at me as though I had insulted the family. "She's just asking for recognition, Rachel," she said gently, but her eyes carried disappointment. My uncle chimed in. "Don't be selfish, she helped, and you should be grateful." Every word struck like a slap. Melissa sat there soaking it in, twisting the story until I looked like the villain. My attempts to explain sounded defensive, bitter, like I was hoarding credit. I wanted to scream that no one had been there in the dark mornings, that no one else had scrubbed the counters or managed the bills. But I knew the more I argued, the more it would feed her narrative. Melissa leaned forward, her voice soft but sharp enough for everyone to hear. "All I'm saying is that partnership is partnership. 27% reflects my role, and I think it's fair." The table nodded along, eyes turning toward me with judgment instead of support. My heart pounded, and for the first time since opening my doors, I felt stripped of the ground beneath my feet. After that dinner, I thought maybe Melissa's declaration was just another one of her dramatic stunts, something she'd let go of once the attention faded. I was wrong. A few days later, she appeared at my shop after closing, slipping through the door with the same smug confidence she'd worn at the table. She carried a folder tucked under her arm, and before I could even greet her, she laid it across the counter with a sharp snap. "Here it is," she said, sliding the papers toward me. "The contract. All we need is your signature." I stared down at the neatly typed pages. Words blurred as my eyes caught on the figure she had so proudly announced before, 27%. Not a suggestion, not an idea, but a demand carved into legal language she had clearly paid someone to prepare. I flipped through the sheets, my chest tightening. This wasn't a joke. "Melissa," I whispered, my voice barely steady. "What is this?" She folded her arms, chin lifted high. "It's simple. You've done well, but let's be honest. You wouldn't be here without me. I'm the one who shaped the image, who gave you credibility. I've earned my cut. 27% of profits moving forward. That's fair, and you know it." Anger and disbelief tangled in my chest. "I never asked you to do anything. You've never worked a shift, never touched the oven, never signed a lease. This is my business. Mine." Her smile turned sharp, a predator's grin. "Careful, Rachel. If you won't acknowledge me, I'll tell everyone the truth, that this bakery was my idea from the start, that you stole it out from under me. Who do you think people will believe? The shy dropout who couldn't hold a job, or the sister who's always been the face of success?" Her words sliced deep, hitting scars I'd carried for years. She knew exactly where to aim. My throat ached, but I forced myself to hold her gaze. "You can say whatever you want," I said slowly, each word dragged out like it weighed 100 pounds. "But I won't sign this. Not now, not ever." For a heartbeat, silence hung between us. Then Melissa snatched the papers back, her nails digging into the folder's edges. The mask of charm slipped, revealing fury boiling beneath. "You'll regret this," she spat, her voice low and venomous. "You think you can push me aside, but I'll ruin you. Everyone will know what kind of thief you really are." She turned on her heel, the bell above the door jangling violently as she stormed out into the night. I stood frozen behind the counter, surrounded by the scent of bread cooling on racks, the same bread I had poured myself into, and all I felt was hollow. My own sister had just tried to rob me, and worse, she was ready to destroy me if I didn't hand her a piece of my soul. The storm began quietly, whispers drifting through town like smoke no one could see the source of. At first, I noticed sideways glances from neighbors, conversations that cut short when I walked into the room. Then came the questions, small but sharp, from customers who leaned across the counter as if they were doing me a favor. "Is it true you pushed Melissa out?" one woman asked, her tone more curious than kind. Another man frowned as he picked up his order. "I heard you promised her part of the business, and then backed out. That true?" I forced polite smiles, brushed off their probing, but each word felt like grit under my skin. The rumors grew bolder. People said I had cheated Melissa, that I had taken credit for her ideas, that the bakery wasn't doing as well as it looked. More than once, someone mentioned court, repeating Melissa's claim that she was preparing to sue me. I kept my hands steady as I bagged loaves, but my stomach twisted with every accusation. At home, things were worse. My parents sat me down one evening, their faces lined with disapproval. My mother's voice was soft but heavy with guilt. "Rachel, she's your sister. Family should come first. If she wants a share, maybe it's easier to just give it to her." My father nodded, adding, "This fighting doesn't look good. People talk. Think of the family's reputation." Their words stung more than the gossip outside. I had spent years carving a path on my own, and now the people who raised me were asking me to hand it over to keep Melissa happy. I tried explaining, tried laying out the truth, but their expressions only hardened. To them, Melissa's story was easier to believe. I left their house that night with a weight pressing down on my chest, realizing I was standing alone. At the bakery the next morning, I plastered on a smile for the line at the door, even as my heart ached. A couple of customers asked bluntly about the supposed lawsuit. Others lingered too long, as though they were waiting for me to confess. Claire and Ben exchanged worried looks but said nothing. Every whisper, every pointed question, made the walls feel closer, but I refused to let Melissa's lies become my truth. I rose before dawn, shaped the dough, swept the floors, and kept the shelves full. I poured myself into every task, because if I stopped, even for a moment, the hurt might crush me. The betrayal burned, but beneath it, a small, stubborn flame held steady. Melissa could spin her stories, my parents could plead for peace, but I knew the bakery's heartbeat came from my own hand. And as long as that remained, I wasn't ready to surrender. One afternoon, as I wiped down the counter after the lunch rush, the bell over the door chimed and Daniel stepped inside. He carried the same calm air he had the first time we met, but his expression was sharper, as though he'd come with a purpose. After a brief greeting, he asked if we could talk somewhere private. I led him to the small table in the back, where I usually sorted receipts at night. "I've been hearing things," he began carefully, folding his hands on the table. "Stories about ownership disputes, financial trouble, even the possibility of legal action. Before I take any further steps, I need clarity." The weight of his words pressed against me, but instead of panic, a steadiness rose in my chest. I had lived under Melissa's shadow long enough. This was my chance to cut through it. Without hesitation, I pulled out a folder I had been keeping ready, records I had gathered the moment her threats began. I laid them across the table one by one. The signed lease with only my name, the business license registered solely to me, tax filings, payroll documents for Claire and Ben. Every scrap of paper traced back to my hands alone. Daniel studied each page with quiet focus. "You've kept everything organized," he said finally, a flicker of approval in his eyes. "There's no sign of her involvement at all." I met his gaze and let the truth spill out, the long nights, the false claims, the pressure from my own family. My voice wavered at times, but I didn't hold back. When I finished, silence filled the room, heavy but not hostile. He leaned back, tapping a finger lightly against the table. "Rachel," he said, "I've dealt with entrepreneurs for years, and most fold when conflict arises. You've handled this with integrity, and that tells me more than numbers ever could. I still believe your bakery has potential, and I want to help you grow it. Not just the shop, another location. Bigger. Better." The words settled over me like sunlight breaking through clouds. For weeks, I had been drowning under lies and isolation, but here was proof that truth carried weight. My chest loosened, and for the first time in what felt like forever, I could breathe deeply. We shook hands, sealing a future Melissa had no part in. As Daniel left, I stood in the doorway, watching him disappear down the street, my heart pounding not with fear but with fire. The path forward was clear. I didn't need to fight Melissa with her own weapon. I didn't need to prove anything to those who believed her stories. The greatest revenge was simple. Keep building, keep thriving, keep living a life she could never take credit for. Let her rage against a world that no longer listened. My hands were enough, my work was enough, and with that, I knew she would never win. The weeks that followed carried a steady rhythm of preparation. With Daniel's backing, plans for a second shop moved swiftly from sketches on paper to walls being painted, ovens delivered, and signs hung above the door. I threw myself into every detail, from choosing the tile on the floor to training the new team who would bring the place to life. It was exhausting, yes, but this time the exhaustion felt different. It carried promise. By the time the grand opening day arrived, the new space gleamed, filled with the scent of bread fresh from the ovens and the chatter of eager customers waiting outside. The ribbon was cut, applause rippled through the crowd, and the doors swung open. Lines formed immediately, faces familiar and new pressing inside. My employees worked smoothly, trays passing from hand to hand, voices warm with welcome. I was greeting a group of regulars when I saw her, Melissa, walking in like she belonged there, heels clicking against the tile, smile wide enough to split her face. She wasted no time weaving through the crowd, stopping to shake hands and drop her name as though she were the host. "Welcome to our newest location," she said brightly to a couple near the pastry cake. I caught the words clearly, every syllable slicing into the air. Staff members stiffened, and I felt the eyes of customers flick toward me, waiting for confirmation. I stepped forward, steady and calm, and placed myself between her and the people she was trying to charm. My voice carried over the chatter, clear enough for everyone to hear. "Melissa," I said, meeting her eyes, "you are not and never were a part of this." The room seemed to still. Conversations faltered, trays paused midair. She blinked, color rising in her cheeks, but before she could speak, I continued. "This bakery, every brick, every loaf, belongs to the people who actually worked for it, not to those who claimed credit without lifting a finger." The silence broke with murmurs. Customers glanced at each other, realization dawning. Claire and Ben, standing near the counter, straightened with quiet pride. Melissa's confident mask cracked as she stammered something inaudible, her voice drowned out by the buzz of the crowd. A moment later, she spun on her heel and stormed out, her heels striking the floor with angry precision. By evening, word had already spread. The truth settled into the town like a final puzzle piece clicking into place. Stories that once painted me as deceitful dissolved under the weight of what people had seen with their own eyes. The same mouths that once questioned me now repeated a different tale. Melissa had been lying, and I had carried the business alone from the start. Even my parents, who had clung to her narrative, looked at me differently. Pride softened their voices when they spoke, hesitation replacing judgment. The balance had shifted, not because I fought with her, but because the truth had finally spoken louder than her lies. The months after the second shop opened felt like stepping into a new chapter of my life. Each morning, the hum of mixers and the scent of rising dough filled not just one storefront but two. Customers lined up early, eager for warm loaves and pastries, their voices filling both spaces with energy. Orders came in from cafes, restaurants, and even offices looking to stock their shelves. What once began as a single table at a market had grown into something steady and undeniable. I walked through my doors each day with a sense of quiet pride, knowing every inch of it had been built by my own hand. Melissa, on the other hand, faded into the background. She stopped coming around, no more surprise visits, no more grand declarations. Word of her behavior had circled far and wide, and wherever she went, the whispers followed. Her attempts to hold onto the story unraveled, leaving her isolated, clinging to resentment instead of recognition. I would catch a glimpse of her at family gatherings sometimes, sitting off to the side with a sour expression, but she had lost her audience. The same relatives who once praised her now avoided the topic altogether. She had written herself out of the narrative she fought so hard to claim. For me, the bitterness softened with distance. The betrayal still lived in me, but it no longer burned. Instead, it became a scar I could trace without pain, a reminder of what I had survived. I no longer needed her approval, her validation, or even her presence. I had thought for so long that blood was supposed to mean loyalty, but I learned the hard truth. Some of the deepest cuts come from the people closest to you. Yet, that truth carried its own kind of strength. Melissa's attempt to take what was mine forced me to stand taller, to defend what I had earned, to believe in myself when even family doubted me. She had tried to dim my light, but in the end, all she did was make it shine brighter. Now, when I lock up at night and glance back at the glow of the bakery windows, I don't think about her anymore. I think about the long road it took to get here, the endless hours of work, the risks, the failures, and the quiet victory. I think about how close I came to giving in, and how grateful I am that I didn't. So if there's one thing I carry forward, it's this. Betrayal can break you if you let it, but it can also shape you into something unshakable. Sometimes the best revenge isn't fighting back or proving someone wrong. It's living fully, thriving without them, and refusing to hand over even a piece of your light. And that's exactly what I chose. Do you think I was right to stand my ground against Melissa, or should I have given her another chance? Let me know in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell for more stories.